Welcome to PAX Pirata on copyright, creativity, conflict and collaboration. I am your humble moderator, Ben McGuinness. First things first, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders from other communities who may be here today. Today on this panel we have Simon Frew, a musician and president of Pirate Party Australia, Jennifer Shiala, a game developer from Flat Earth Games, Morgan Jaffet, creative developer from Defiant Development, Paul Noonan, board member from Music Australia and a copyright lawyer, and at the end we have Bridget Dixon from Thompson Gear Law, a copyright lawyer who worked on the Dallas Buyers Club case, which of course we may all be somewhat familiar with. Alrighty, let's get started. Why don't we start with Simon?
Right. Basically, I sort of became interested in sort of intellectual property issues around because I'm an artist, and I saw the potential the internet gave to artists to get work out and be able to just cut out the middleman and just give stuff straight to consumers. And I make music. I've had music taken down for, like, I've done some mashups that have been DCMA'd or DMCA'd, and so I've sort of been on the receiving end of overly aggressive copyright issues over the years and stuff, and sort of found myself in sort of my two loves of music and politics. I found myself, somehow found myself leader of the Pirate Party. Yeah, I'll just stop there and let everyone else introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I am a game designer, and I think I'm on this panel because I am from Germany, and we have a very different perspective and cultural approach to copyright and pirating in general. When I came here 1.5 years ago, as a creator, but also as a consumer, it was really foreign to me that people have kind of adapted pirating music and games and movies to be part of the culture of Australia and Australians. So that's probably my role in this. I'm also a creator. I work on a game called Objects in Space. So we're indie, and we're one of the struggling indie force of Australia, making games for all of you.
So my name is Morgan. I run a game studio in Brisbane. We've got about 25 people. Our bread and butter is IP that we create. So I have one perspective on IP. I used to run an open source software development studio in the 90s. So I have that perspective on the sharing economy. And fundamentally, I come down on the side that most of the work we create, if we're fortunate enough, becomes part of the culture around us, and I think people have an entitlement to the culture that they're part of. I don't think you should just be sold your culture. I think you have ownership of it. You get to do things with it on your side. So I'm a big fan of mashups and fan creations and remixes and new ways of looking at the things that are built. We have a very open policy to people building things with our work. Our basic rule of thumb is if you're not making money off it, you can do whatever you want, and if you want to make money off it, then we're happy to talk about that too. We're pretty relaxed.
I'm from on the board of Music Australia, which is a sort of peak music industry body. Before I became a lawyer, I was a professional musician in a few rock bands. And I'm on this panel because I got into a Twitter spat with Ben, whom neither of us knew each other at the time, about copyright. And because about the productivity, there's been a recent inquiry by the Productivity Commission into copyright that's caused a lot of controversy in the creative community, as some of you might know. And I was engaging pretty heavily after a few reads one Saturday night. And I believe I called Ben a condescending prick. And a couple of weeks later I got an email from him, or a DM on Twitter, asking if I'd come on this panel. So,
Well, I was sitting at home and I thought, I've got to run this panel. And I asked out loud, who do I know who can take the pro-copyright stand? And once I asked it out loud, the answer was obvious.
yeah, look, both as a being on an organisation that represents musicians or musical making bodies, and personally as a former musician, I've got what a lot of you would probably regard as a fairly conservative position on copyright. I recognise the issues that have just been mentioned about mashups and digital technology and the way that affects creativity these days, but I think the fundamental point is consent, people giving their consent to others doing what they want to do with their material, and being able to withhold that consent if they don't want people to mash up their material or use it in particular ways. And the hot button issues that we might touch on tonight are about that, because in Australia there's a big push towards a much more expansive regime that allows people to use copyright material without being sued. And the other issue, yeah, so in Australia we've got a pretty restrictive fair dealing regime where there's some very specific exceptions like criticism and review or reporting news, that sort of thing, where you can use copyright material up to a reasonable extent without being pinged. Whereas in the States they've got fair use, which is a much more comprehensive and really quite controversial concept that allows much more freedom of use of material without requiring the owner's consent. So that's where I sort of come from in the debate anyway, if that makes sense.
So I'm also a lawyer, so it'll be no surprise that I'm a copyright champion as well. But having said that, I'm in my late 20s now, so any consumer choice I made was made in an age where if I wanted it, I should be able to get it, and I should probably be able to get it on my phone, which I think shapes how you feel about these things that are first principles that people have been working with for so long. I've got copyright experience, so I'm a rights holder lawyer. At the same time, I see you all breathed a sigh of relief about Dallas Buyers Club. I don't know why. And I was actually on the side of the telecommunications company in that one, and fought from a perspective that I really believed in as well. So I think that that's where the consumer choice comes into that, is this idea that things should be accessible. You should be able to get what you want when you want it, but if you're going to get it, you should probably have a way to pay for it and not pay a premium for it. And I guess that's where I come from.
Can I just suggest something that came out of a conversation I had with Jennifer just before we came in? And she was talking about her perception coming from Germany and now working in Australia at the moment, that there's a real cultural difference between attitudes to copyright, consuming copyright material in Germany compared to Australia, and particularly in relation to consent and piracy, that sort of thing. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I can just elaborate on that real quick, just so you understand where I'm coming from. So, where I come from, obviously there are always people who pirate things and who go down on music and games and movies. However, overall, it's not really something that is being accepted into the culture of young Germans. Even though we want to consume these things, there's still like a cultural barrier between that wanting it and actually pirating it. When I came here 1.5 years ago, that was very different. When I tell my Australian friends that I have never pirated anything, they look at me like I'm crazy. So I don't even know. It's so bad that I wouldn't even know how. I have no idea. If you would sit me in front of a machine. Thanks, Morgan. So I have no idea even how it works. And I work with computers my entire life. So That's how far that actually goes. And I found it to be really interesting. And I'm not quite sure where the difference lies. We talked a little bit about that there are quite strict laws in Germany, and they are being enforced very, very strictly as well. So my uncle, for example, was part of one of those lawsuits where he was accused of downloading, I think, music, and he had to pay 5,000 euros at the time, which is quite a lot in Australian dollars. And he didn't do it. He has no idea how to do that. But there was enough evidence to just have a screenshot of all the downloaded data via your internet connection to be a law case in court. So yeah, he was convicted, and that was a thing.
So that wouldn't be enough evidence in Australia. And that was something we worked on. And no, it's just a well-worked system is the system that works, and I think that that's what you've got to think of when you're coming from both of these perspectives. Jen, one thing that I wonder is if things were more accessible, and this is obviously something that gets run, is if things are more accessible, we're very fortunate in that we live in a society that puts some sort of inherent worth and value on creative outcomes and on creative work. So everyone accepts that, you should pay a bit of money for a movie. Everyone understands that you should pay money for music, even bad music sometimes. You should pay money for games because people work very hard on them. We work in a system where if you don't get paid, then you can't do it. So I think that there's that general acceptance here, but in Australia, it is so hard to get content sometimes, and you've seen the way that things have changed with the introduction of streaming services and how long that took for us to get those, and without having to use VPNs. And I think that that's where that general acceptance comes from, is that it is so hard to get things. It is so hard to get good things. We do not have bad taste in Australia. If you give us good movies, we will buy them. If you give us good shows, we will buy them. But at the moment, if your market looks the way that it does, then there's this general acceptance. And ultimately, the people who lose out on that is everyone, because there are less people consuming good content. There are less people being paid to consume good content. There's less good content being produced and funded in Australia. And I can imagine that that happens in all sorts of outlets. So it's interesting that when Dallas came up, one of the things that got talked about is how accepted it is, how we are huge downloaders. We're the biggest pirates in the world, right? I don't know where those numbers necessarily come from. Sometimes you need to check them.
So can I just briefly touch, as somebody whose
Yes.
game goes across the world, and we get to see our stats.
So we've made mobile games, and we've also made games for Steam and PC, and we get great numbers and feedback from both of those. And there is no way we pirate more than China. Like, not a chance in a scratch in hell, because I can release a game that sells 5,000 copies, and I can have 800,000 users. And 99% of those are in China. And I think, but the interesting thing about China is that China's starting to pay. So China's seeing exactly these issues that we talk about, where, difficulty of consumption. Now, I would say culturally, piracy is still pretty accepted there too, but also that games have. So I don't think it's quite true anymore to say that games believe that you should pay for games, because the price of games has descended to free, and the enormous amount of profit in the game space is made by free-to-play games. So in which there is no distinction between a pirated copy and a real copy. But this leads to a very singular type of game. So it means it's a game that's backed onto a server that's storing some data that is relevant, and then you have consumables, and that's not the sort of game we make. So we make coherent linear experiences that come with a price tag and are fixed and are easily pirated. And that's totally okay. But I think you've seen the vast majority of profit move into the free-to-play space, so the vast amount of money in terms of investment in games goes to free to play and goes to games that have that are services, not purely content.
I think with like a lot of the driving of piracy is done through the lack of accessibility, and like for example, since I got a Steam account, I just sort of stopped pirating games completely. It's just better to pay for them. You can put them, like mark them down and wait to get the email that it's a half price or whatever and buy it.
That's a terrible attitude from somebody who works for the pirate.
Yeah. But it's an accessibility issue, and then it's also like you get better quality if you pay for a game because you get all the updates, and if you just pirate it, you get like 1.0, which will be buggy, might be really lopsided, and just kind of a less good experience. I've been like a lot slower to come to stop pirating TV shows and stuff like that until I got a Netflix account, and now I've cut that down a lot because it's just it's cheap and it's so easy to use, and there's so much content there that I just kind of go, oh, TV, what do I watch? And just scroll through until I find something that appeals to me and put it on. And like I think a lot of the driver and why Australia has a reputation of being really heavy piraters comes from like, particularly in movies where there's staggered release dates. And so you're getting, like in social media is a global platform, so you'd be getting tweets telling you what's happening in the movie months before we're allowed to see it. And so people going, oh, the movie's ruined for me, I'm going to download the next movie straight away, so that way I can actually watch it and not have it spoiled by all the spoilers coming out from overseas. And there's no way to stop that. And the movie industry's like getting better at this, and they're bringing in release dates closer to be like global release dates, and probably in some cases they are. I really think it's sort of the thing where if it's like a reasonable price and it's accessible, then people are a lot less likely to pirate it than they would be if it was if it's difficult and you get like all the DRM locking it down and you get massive like 2-minute piracy out at the start of the movie and stuff like that.
I really think that's a really interesting point that you brought up with things being easy, because out of all the new platforms that we have for games or for movies or for anything really that are now successful in their fields, they have one thing in common: they're easy. Netflix is easy. You pay a fixed amount. It's easy to use, and same goes for Steam, and same goes for Spotify. And I think that is what newer generations also want. We are a very different and new generation of consumers that care about things being easy and accessible.
Could I just say something there? I think there are two things there. One is there's a lot of discussion about what consumers want, and obviously that's really important when you're in a business that's producing material that you want people to buy. But there is a fundamental point that copyright material is property, and the people that own the property have got the right to decide what they want to do with it, in my view. And sometimes they might want to keep something off the market for a short period or a longer period.
But which part of the market? That's the thing. I mean, it's not so much holding back the material as holding it back from specific parts of the market. It's the distribution chain that is the major cause of the problem in most cases, especially as was mentioned before with movies. Now, it's fine where you've got a reel or number of reels that you're shipping around the world. There is a production cost there. But who buys DVDs anymore? Most... Oh, God damn it!
You buy them?
Well, actually,
well, that's interesting. Yeah.
Whilst we do download a great deal, Australians spend more per capita than any other Western country in the world. At least that was the case when we took those numbers to the election in, 2013? That's still the case, right, Simon? Yes?
I'm not sure.
Simple question. Do you believe that we're so rampant in piracy because of the sheer fact that it costs so damn much to buy a DVD? I mean, just to buy one collection of an anime series costs $57.98 based on my last check. Do you believe that's the reason we made it piracy? Because it is
I'd say it's a combination of cost and the ability to actually obtain it in Australia. We're still classed as Region 4 after the US and Canada in Region 1. Region 2 is Europe and parts of, I believe, Southeast Asia, Japan, I think. And Region 3 is most of the rest of the world except for Australia and New Zealand. And we are literally the arse end of the planet and get everything last.
Well, we have, you know, whenever you talk about a physical item, Australia's shit house. Like,
yes.
It's just, we have a small population, we're geographically dispersed, and we're on literally as far away from anything as you can possibly be.
If there's a brighter centre of the universe, this is the planet that's from.
That's right. Look, and that's just a reality, and the more niche the product too. So the smaller the audience, the more overhead costs are involved in bringing it over. That said, we are pretty well overcharged for everything, and particularly on digital stuff where you have distribution. There are a lot of archaic distribution agreements in place that drive pricing. You know, an American price will be set, a local distributor will have a local price based around physical goods, and therefore your digital copy will cost the same as if it had to be shipped here on a boat to a niche. And these are all difficult problems to solve without pissing off your physical goods distribution chain.
But here's the thing.
So,
okay, so you've got a DVD and you're thinking you're shipping it from America, but are you really? You could transfer it digitally and press it here in Moorabbin.
look, you could, but again, it comes down to facilities. Like, there are various facilities of various sizes, and we've looked into physical copies of various of our games. There are places locally that do it, but they do it pretty expensively because, again, they're small batch compared to a Chinese factory that can churn out. You know, it's rarely coming from America, but in some cases it is. I think there's, you know, the thing I think we have to be careful about is in almost every case there are reasons that these things exist. That doesn't make it right, correct, or maintainable. So you've got an ongoing process of reasons and justifications, but we have better options and we have better opportunities, and things will change. And to touch on the Australian element, you know, I just think we're criminal by nature, aren't we? Like, you know, like, particularly compared to Germans. Germans are very rule-abiding, like, you know.
Another thing, I think Legion Coding is the worst thing we have ever created. I find it broken and crippling that we have DVD region codes. In fact, the ACCC mandated, I believe, in 2010 they couldn't even use region codes because
it's technically the thing about region coding and the ACCC, although they did get a little bit crushed by the MPAA for trying to arc up about it. The issue with that was that because the DVDs and now Blu-rays as well are encrypted, requiring very specific devices to play those items as distinct from a region-free media, is that was technically third-line forcing in what was then the Trade Practices Act and is now the
Australian Consumer Law.
Yeah, that one.
Can we actually do questions maybe in the end and do that?
So we're heading towards the end now.
Could I just
Because I'm sure we can answer all of this later, but it would be great to do a little bit of a foundation and then we can take questions from the audience. It would be great.
Yeah. You understand?
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, no, it's...
Look, I just wanted to reiterate that I think again there the discussion, even though obviously you're a creator and that's your business, the discussion again shifted back to the consumer perspective, and I'm not trying to downplay that, but copyright is by nature at the moment, and always has been, a territorial beast. So you create something in Australia and you get your rights come from the Australian Copyright Act, and because there are a whole lot of international treaties you also get corresponding rights in other countries. But from the perspective of a creator who's been in bands or a songwriter or or other, filmmakers who are clients of mine and so on. The ability to control where your work gets exploited and commercialised and who buy is really fundamental to your ability to make money out of what you do. Because if you do a deal with a big global behemoth, who's to say that they're going to have any interest in exploiting your product in Italy or Sweden or whatever? And there are countless Australian bands who've had niche successes in countries and made really good money because they've done deals with independent labels in a range of different countries. And I think that needs to be looked at as well. The whole region coding thing and the fact that the Australian parliamentary inquiry showed that we do get really hard done by in terms of purchasing software and music and films. You don't want to dismiss that, but there is something on the other side of the ledger as well.
I think there's one thing that we tend to forget whenever we talk about copyright, because the copyright discussion always seems to be a lot about money, and that's valid, obviously, and that's where a lot of that comes from. But there's something more about this that you just touched on, which is control over the things that you create and having agency over the things that you create, because you have to understand that a lot of musicians and developers like myself develop things that are very close to them and that are very personal a lot of the time. So it's not always only about money. It's sometimes about where do I want my content to pop up? Am I okay with the platforms where it's there, it exists, or do I maybe feel uncomfortable with my content that is very close to my heart and that is very personal sometimes to be on a platform that I not only disagree with or that I find difficult or goes against what I believe in, for example. And there's also that part of copyright that is not only about money.
Jen, just to add to that is there's one of those stories that comes back to me about that idea of where do I want it to actually be is when Pauline Hanson launched One Nation and used the I Am Australian song, that song. Now, the people who own the copyright in that were really ashamed that it was being used. And their way of pulling that song away from it, of saying that is not what this song is about, you have no right to affiliate with that, was through copyright. They were able to say, you don't have the rights to that, you can't perform it publicly, you can't play it, stop it. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the original idea of copyright was to have a way for there was a balance between the creators and the consumers, and so the original copyright only lasted for 14 years with a chance to get renewed if you're actually still publishing it for another 14. And now it's life plus 70 years, which is absolutely ludicrous for games because there's no way a system is going to that we use today is going to be used in 70 years' time. And so, a lot of it is just sort of arcane for the sort of field that we're discussing today. And you see in other works, in a lot of old movies and old music pieces and stuff, where before it runs out of copyright, virtually no one listens to it for about 30 years because they have to pay full price and they don't know what it is, and there's just no way to access it, and it just sort of everyone just waits until it comes out in public domain and then they can access it again. And people who are music historians and that'll go through what they find. So the problem Pirate Party sees is that it's just swung too far, for too long in terms of the rights holders. And so we sort of think that winding it back to 15 years would be fine. And to keep copyright just for commercial purposes, if you're making a mod or something like that, as long as it's not so it's a different, with modding and stuff, it's probably a bit of a sidetrack, but there's a lot of, with MMOs and stuff, modding controlled by the people who make the games really important because they keep the game balanced, they can sort out if people make a mod that sort of breaks the game, if anyone who uses the mod becomes a super character, that's really important that the owners can retain the control. And single player games we kind of feel that modding would be best to just be sort of open slather, as long as you own the original copy of the game and you can add whatever mods you like, especially, and a lot of gaming companies seem to realise this and just have like support for modding and have it fairly open. But yeah, like we sort of like, we think that like the balance has to be like sort of restored. So you see it, and this is why the sort of drivers for like consumers is like, well, it's out in America, why can't we have it? It's like on the internet, I can just use a VPN, pretend to be American, and I've got it. Like, it's just sort of like it's a stupid artificial barrier that's really sort of, that's what drives, I think, a lot of consumers to do it, and we sort of just feel that we need to shift the balance back.
Which is why I make the sometimes unpopular within the party, because I'm also a pirate party member, the sometimes unpopular argument that it should be death of the author plus 25 years, on the theory that if you write or create something and following this you have celebratory sex, of this there is issue, and then immediately afterwards you get hit by a bus, death of the author plus 25 years will get your kid through university, and then they're on their own.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. You know, there are all sorts of examples of this where, for example, Chris Bailey from the Saints, a seminal punk band, Australian punk band, wrote a song called Like Firewood back in about 78 or 79. Bruce Springsteen recorded it in 2014 and it sold 500,000 copies. Now under the platform of the Pirate Party, and there's a lot about the Pirate Party platform that I find is fine from a copyright perspective. But under that platform, Chris would have got nothing out of that song, and I don't see the economic or other justification for that. You know, I was in a band in the 80s. We've got a major record label that wants to, for some reason, wants to release 2 of our songs at the moment. The record company that financed that album never made us money back. I don't see the economic reason why they shouldn't be able to get some return now, even though the song came out 30 years ago.
I'd like to touch on that a bit from the perspective of games, though, which is that most games... So I run a studio, and the upshot of running a studio is that I own the work of the people who work for us, because that's how a game development contract works. Almost every game is created under that model, and it's a very common model now in film and television and a whole bunch of different industries. You can go back to comics and look at all the stuff that Jack Kirby created and Stan Lee took credit and ownership of. The truth of the matter is, like, it's very easy to make an emotive argument about a creator and, you know, and the belief that they should profit for their work 40 years on. But 99% of creators in today's society are stiffed by corporations. Like, they're not seeing the profit of their work. So I don't think it's as simple as the emotive argument that a creator, something was done with their work 20 or 30 years on, and therefore they should profit. You know, it's very easy to look at the Marvel movies at the moment, which were all created by people who are either still alive, people who wrote the scripts, or the comic book scripts that those movies are based on. They were paid their $50 at the time, and they're not seeing a cent of it, and that's the norm. Like, mostly we're talking about protecting corporate interests. Like, the vast majority here is not talking about creators' interests.
Do you think that it would change the negotiating position, though, if my experience is in music, so giving over the rights, it gives that long term. So when you ask for your advance, that's what they have. They have it for that. Now, if your advance was, if the term that they had that music for was only for 14 years or 7 years, and we're talking about big corporations, like you say, it's their corporate interest, do you think that would change their negotiating position then? Like, would you then get an advance that was a third or less than a third of what you could be expecting if you had the standard?
Because we all know that these we all know these late windfall events aren't banked into the price you pay. Like, they happen and people benefit from them, but they're almost never priced in. You price in, you know,
the first year's sales, and then you multiply out the long tail over the next 5 years. But at that point in time, you know, you consider yourself lucky if you pick up money down the line, but nobody banks on it.
And then it would just die in an archive.
Well, not if there's like. Are you saying it would die in an archive if it didn't have a corporation to push it out?
No, I'm saying that if the term is shorter,
Yeah.
if the corporation's not going to make money for it for that long a time, if we're not going to celebrate, what is it, the Yachty Indie remix that's celebrating its 25 years today. Now, if no one's able to make, not today, this year, but if no one's able to make any money off that, then now is it just going to
Well, I think that
disintegrate?
if we're suggesting that it passed out of copyright, then people could make money out of it. Then we'd have competition in the market to release the remixes, of course, in the various places that they would go. But we're not suggesting
But would there be competition? Because wouldn't it just be part of the common? It would be owned commonly if there was no copyright.
Yes, but
That would be even better.
the remix itself also be under copyright, so you'd have the copyright of each individual remixer, and of course, who are you going to go to? Are you going to go to the bloke down the street with his copy of Logic Pro, or are you going to go to the original artist and his mates who are putting out the official remix album?
And don't get me wrong too, I'm with all of these things, I think there's a balance. You know, in no way am I suggesting winding all of these things back. As I say, I run a company that is based and built on IP. But also, I don't feel the need to provide for my children by locking that down. And I think games actually persist a lot more now. Like, 70 years is pretty reasonable to think that...
I think that's the issue everyone has, is the life plus 70, right?
Yeah. Like, and you know, if you think about Nintendo, like, Nintendo will have a version of Super Mario Brothers on everything that they release as long as they are still a company. They're really good at continuing to refresh their stuff. There's a lot of games that were released at the same time that are now just and in fact, in some cases, it's difficult to reissue them because nobody knows who owns them anymore because they've been through so many companies and shell companies. But like, I'm not advocating for an outright complete reversal. I do think, you know, I think particularly in Australians, given that we have so little respect for the rule of law, that the practicalities are going to reverse a lot of this for us. And at some point, the law has to catch up with what people are doing en masse.
Can I ask, just because I'm curious, when you say the law has to catch up, what do you actually, I mean, are you proposing something specific in this? I'm curious because I don't know much about it.
Well, I'm not suggesting something specific, but I am suggesting that at any point in time when you're looking at, you know, a large percentage of the population breaking the law regularly, you have to revise your laws.
Well, yeah, totally. That's super true. But I also feel like that there's a lot in this particular Australian case. There's a lot that has to do with culture and with how people react to these laws and to how we consume things. Because I feel like there's a lot that has been part of the Australian almost identity to be angry about being so isolated, and it's true. I mean, it's true. You are. I'm sorry.
It's like somebody put us on ships.
It's almost so, and yes, and that's true. That is it's very valid. But I feel like because of that anger of being isolated and being left out with, you know, movie releases and services, a lot of the time, the anger over that overshadows what creators and consumers actually should be doing. You know, there's something amazing there that we kind of tend to overlook because we're so tangled up in, oh my god, we're all so angry about this, which is because I believe that you all want to actually support the people that create for you. I wholeheartedly believe that you are on that side of the fence, but that all the other stuff gets in the way of that, and the anger about not having the access. But in the end, who you're hurting by pirating is the person that you don't want to hurt, which is the creator. So where do you start? You know.
Yeah. Like I think I just sort of with that, I guess I sort of look at it as like just sort of having a lot of friends overseas and stuff like that, with TV in particular, like not having access to the show the day it's released in the US ruins a TV show. So where it's like a lot better now, but like a few years ago, the only way to not have The Walking Dead ruined for you was just go and pirate it. It's literally the only way you could actually watch the show and not know what's going to happen in the next scene. I think that's sort of what drives a lot of the motivation. It's more just to actually enjoy it as it's meant to be enjoyed, because we're in a global communication system, and that needs to be taken into account. And market segmentation really screws us in Australia. And sort of generally with the music and stuff, I'm going to release an EP probably very early next year. I actually spent my marketing budget to come down to this, so I better re-save that up.
So everyone buy it. I told you you'd plug it during this panel.
But yeah, everyone is like, I'm going to put it up on torrent sites myself. I'm going to put it up for sale, so if people want to buy it, that's great. But I'm going to do and I'll have it on different sites to share for free. So, but anyone who wants to have it can use it. Anyone who wants to put it in a film clip, in a game or something like that, please credit me. But besides that, go crazy. Yeah, I kind of feel that what I want from my music is for people to want to come and see me live. So my plan is personal, it's different for different artists, and I wouldn't expect everyone to do what I'm suggesting, but I plan to make my money by playing live gigs, and I plan to promote my live gigs by just giving my music to everybody, and everyone will love it, and everyone will come and see me, I hope. That's the theory. But yeah, it's different models work for different people. A lot of people, especially with artists, so sort of comfortable in front of large crowds and don't really want to do that, and they'd rather make their money selling their music, but that's the choice I've sort of made myself. Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, we're coming close to the end. I think it's probably about time to open up for questions. We get a microphone down here to start.
I was wondering how you balanced the competing needs, because you've each got a different point of view, but real world examples. On the one hand, you've got Glenda Lark, an Australian author. She's in her 70s. She's been writing novels for years. She is not on Centrelink benefits because she is getting royalties from books that were published over 15 years ago. So extended copyright is keeping her off Centrelink benefits, and it's saving taxpayers' money. On the other hand, you have Play It Again, which is based in Adelaide. It's a combination of the university, I think it's Flinders University, and some people in New Zealand. They're trying to get Australian and New Zealand games that are, the kinds of games that were released in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and put them online for free so people can play these as legacy games. And they're finding it really difficult because some of these games, they can't track down who owns the copyright. So how do you balance these competing needs with regards to copyright legislation?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I think that's... Could I just have a quick one at that? I think that's a really good question. There are moves towards making some rules about what they call orphan works, and allowing use of works where copyright can't be tracked back in that way. The second thing I'd say about that is, this is an argument that comes a lot from academics, and I think that really if you're having that much trouble finding an owner and suggesting that they might make some money out of it, for heaven's sake, take a risk and put it out there and see what happens, because there's likelihood that someone's going to sue you.
It's not legal advice, though.
Thanks for that.
My God, we got nearly an hour through before somebody
and
said
you're
that.
recording this, aren't you? So that I think really there's got to be there's a threshold here where people are doing things that they probably shouldn't be with copyright material, and they're not getting sued. So there's a lot of people making a lot of alarmist talk about a crisis in copyright, which
Yeah, I mean,
isn't
if,
really
if,
there.
If you can't work out who the owner is and you put it out there and then someone goes, oh shit, that's mine, then you can actually have the conversation because it's the only way you can find the person.
Yeah, the Pirate Party actually has written our copyright policy on this, that we want to set up like an orphan works office where if people who want to publish orphan works make money from it, that if you come along and go, that's mine, the orphan works office will keep a sort of small amount of money to, or a proportion to give to the rights holder, which is their opinion. That's our way of dealing with it, because it's a thing where we think that orphan works should be able to be released.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
I had a quick question for the panel and get your opinion on the Swedish research paper that suggested increased piracy on users translates to increased money spent by that user on content, particularly the lawyers' opinions on that.
So what's the question?
So basically, there was an academic research paper that showed that the highest the most people who pirated the most were also the most likely, who were the heaviest spenders on media content. So there's very few people that just pirate everything and don't pay for anything. The people most likely to spend money on media are the biggest pirates, which is like quite interesting. I don't have any like real opinions on why. It's an interesting thing. I think it's the people who love like
I've got a
the
theory
biggest.
on that. I think it's try before you buy, but you don't get
I'd be curious just to see, I don't know this paper, so I'm not sure. Is this about people pirating something and then buying the same product, or is this just people who consume a lot of media? Because these two things are different. Because, so, it's a strange correlation to make, I think. It's a strange connection to make, because, of course, if I ask my grandma, who's like 90, if she pirates stuff, and she's like, no, that's a different to my cousin who's 19 and who consumes a lot of media overall. So I'm not sure it's the right thing to say that people who pirate are also great general consumers by default.
What's interesting about that too, and we see some of this in the stats that come through on our own content, is exactly that. It's rare that you get a conversion from a pirated user to a paying user. And back when I used to be part of a large corporate game developer, we had very good stats. If you ever wonder why like Ubisoft releases something with terrible DRM on it, and then 2 weeks later apologises and says, oops, sorry, and releases a version without it, it's because they know they do 95% of the sales in the first 2 weeks. And they know that if you can't pirate it, you're more likely to buy it. They have great data to back up that decision-making process, and they've also worked out that you can apologise and back down every time, and people go, oh cool, I guess they screwed up, they got the message, that's good. But what they're doing is protecting their first 2 week sales, and they're protecting their first 2 week sales precisely because they know that there's this barrier. You jump on Pirate Bay, you're like, oh, well, it's not there, you go looking around, you're on a site full of viruses, you're like, and you grab that copy and then say, look, it's all too hard, I'll just go buy it. I'll buy it, particularly if it's easy to buy digitally, for example, on Steam or whatever the case is.
I always think with that one also, it's a bit like saying that shoplifters buy a lot of food. What does it excuse the theft, or I think it's an interesting statistic, but I don't think it takes you a long way.
If they were better shoplifters, they wouldn't need to.
I think one thing it could teach us is about when you look at any sort of method of any sort of the way that people consume things, and people are consuming a lot, is that, okay, if we actually really want to target piracy, if we really want to stop them, then how are these people who buy so much, why are they buying music and they're not buying movies? Why is that? What's the price point there? What's the access point there? That would be a really smart thing to do with something like that. And I think that you should stop, if you stop demonising those people and start really, you can hate them, but you kind of got to want to work out how to get their money, because they're the ones who are going to spend it. And I think that becomes interesting.
That's the flip side to that same argument is, are these people really a lost sale?
are they going to spend the money anyway, or are they going to do something else?
Nobody ever, like...
No one's ever answered that one.
No, lost sale is a terrible... Like, nobody... lost sale comes up as a fallacy a lot. Nobody uses lost sale. Nobody considers a pirated copy as a lost sale. Anyone who does is an idiot. And like, but some percentage are lost sales, without a doubt. And there's a lot of research to back this up. The question of where that scale sits is like madness that way lies. But free-to-play answers the question pretty well, actually, which is on just about anything, it's a 3% conversion rate. Like, you can take any number on the planet and you can work out your conversion to paying, and it's about 3%. And that works for...
And there are those of us
But
who
it hurts music. It's a
game.
lost sale for music. If you want a chart, if you want any sort of certification, if you need to make a certain amount of sales, and that is a lost sale. That is 1, 2, 3%. You're 3% behind getting your gold certification, and that's important. And that's important for radio play that has like real ramifications.
Sorry, I agree 100%. Yeah, they are very much... Some percentage is lost sales. It's just the one-to-one thing that I see argued from the pirate perspective a lot, where people, they often say... Yeah, that's right. They're often, they always say, they lost 10,000 sales. Nobody knows, because we all know that it's not a one-to-one, but we also know that it's not no lost sales.
Yeah.
And that's a true statement.
Yeah.
So.
Hi, you mentioned DRM earlier. What's the issue? There's an issue with DRM in some cases that when you buy stuff, especially digitally, the DRM stops you from playing it after a certain amount of time, or the provider goes out, and then you don't want to pay the money to re-download something you've already bought. So then you've got the pirating of, you've already paid for it once digitally. Is there a solution to that where you've bought something but the company that's provided has gone out of business or something's happened and the DRM stops you from actually using something you have paid for legitimately?
Steam promised that if they ever go out of business, they'll release the master key that will, so like, if they go out of business, the whole library gets available, which is, interestingly enough, doesn't protect my rights as a creator at all, but protects users' rights, which I'm much happier with. I prefer the balance that way.
I think there's an element here where people are prepared. This probably won't be a popular view, but people are prepared to take the benefit of digital distribution, but assume that what they're buying is an analogue product. And in fact, for a lot of rights holders, the idea of licensing people to use things on a particular device or for a particular amount of time or whatever is a way of getting revenue streams that might compensate for piracy. And I think people have to consumers maybe need to get their heads around the idea that what they're not buying the book anymore and can hand that on to whoever they want to. They're buying the right to get something, and that right might have different scopes depending on who it is that they're buying from.
Shouldn't we then get a massive discount?
Yeah, I think. Well, maybe you should. I'm a consumer too, so I'm not taking a particular view on this, and I, as a lawyer, act for different people on different sides of these fences. It's just struck me that a lot of the consumer expectation is that they'll get all the benefit of digital access to things, and the convenience and all of that sort of thing with that, but they don't want to have the downside of the limits that digital distributors can put on stuff.
Well, that's the difference between buying something and renting something. So if it's like DRM limited and it's going to run out one day or something, you're not actually buying it, you're renting it. And
that's right.
we view it as basically we think anything that's got DRM on it, you should be able to return for a full refund within the first few months, because it's just a scam used by the companies to rip off consumers. And you can sort of say they're legally allowed to, but morally it's really scummy. And there's a difference where law and morality are completely different things. And so you've got to ask yourself like what you want to do and how you want to treat your consumers. Like stuff like that, you really should treat consumers a bit better, I think. Yeah.
Right, I think we should have last question. Yep, okay.
Oh, hello. I'll go. Yeah. Okay. So I just have a question about your opinion about YouTube and the rigmarole about whatever. The whole issue with copyright on YouTube, and I was wondering your opinion on that.
Can I ask who you're filming for at the moment?
Yeah.
Just yourself?
Yeah.
For a YouTube channel by any chance?
Funnily enough, yes. Thank you for
Are you
this.
using the YouTube standard license or the Creative Commons one?
Can I please upload just this bit to YouTube? Just this bit, please.
I'm okay. I've got a card here if you want some advice later.
I think it depends on the circumstance. Like I've sort of seen a fair bit about debates around live streaming and who owns the rights to like live streaming games and stuff like that, and sort of the virtual playthroughs and like where's the line between what is a game and like is watching a virtual playthrough like watching a movie, or is it actually like playing through the game? I kind of view it as like it's sort of separate thing personally, but it's a tough issue, and I think like generally like most companies handle it really well and like just allow people to like do their playthroughs and reviews and hints and tips and stuff like that, and they just kind of let it go, and they can but yeah, like it is a problem and it gets cracked down on. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
I think a really interesting part of and this isn't the question you asked, but I'm going to answer it anyway. I think a really interesting part of the YouTube question is that YouTube is constituting a much larger percentage of our viewing than it used to. We have content laws in Australia for television stations and for local content, and that drives a lot of the funding around Australian content across the board. And as we move to other distribution methods, funding is dropping on the television side. There's a big push from TV stations to drop those content quotas so that they have less pressure on them because they have less viewers now. And I think it's very tough in Australia where there are these, again, there's a lot of struggling angles coming at it, but we would all like to see Australian content funded, and we'd like to see YouTube doing more than it is at the moment, I think, to empower and create opportunities for Australian creators. So the same is true of Netflix, which broadcasts without any Australian content quotas, funds a whole bunch of stuff, but not a lot of Australian stuff, despite collecting money from Australians. The globalisation of all of these networks and the reliance on backbones that are fundamentally US or Asian tech companies, I think means that we potentially move into a future in which all Australian content has to survive on the commercial global stage, as opposed to having the opportunities that we've built up over the years. And I think it's an interesting question. I don't have any clear answers to it. I think it's just something we need to be aware of as we move our viewership and our attention to so many other different mediums, that we're mostly moving off the mediums that we use to create the great eras of Australian television and film.
I don't know much about the laws and everything it has to do with YouTube policies, but I've always felt that, especially new communities like YouTube and like Twitch and whatever you want to look at, have been really incredible on many occasions of sharing not only content but sharing the success around, if you want. So a lot of the regulations on those platforms, on social platforms and on creators' platforms, has been regulated just by the community wanting to actually help each other out, and that's a really interesting part when we talk about globalization of content and how we always struggle with the law, but we kind of don't see that creators very often sort themselves out on many, many occasions. And if we could work together a bit more on both sides, that would be a really valuable thing to do.
I just want to take on from your point. There's a lot, obviously, in this room, and in just about any time you have these conversations, a feeling that there are big rights holder groups that have got an enormous lot of power in the copyright debate. I don't think that anyone should underestimate the power of Google in this debate and the influence that they're bringing to bear in Australia and around the world on liberalising copyright laws in a way that suits their business model and doesn't always benefit creators. That's something that I think that a lot more attention should be paid to.
Almost certainly right, yep. All right, I think, yep, we've run 20 minutes over time, so